Morning. I'd like to welcome everybody, and at this time we'd like to get the meeting started. So if you would, start with the Lord's Prayer and Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, due to social distancing guidelines, there are limited seating in the council chambers, so we've set up an overflow area on the first floor lobby for the public to watch the live stream of the meeting on PAC 14. Once the audience chairs and the council chambers are filled, as one person leaves, another person can enter. Also, we are trying to resume our normal meeting structure, so public comments are no longer being read into the record by council staff. The public may participate in person to give public comments. Thank you for your patience. All right. This time I'd like approval of the consent agenda. Need a motion?
So moved.
Got a motion? Need a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Chair votes aye, passes unanimously. This time I'd like to recognize Delegate Sherry Sample Hughes, who's in our audience. Welcome. Thank you. Okay. All right. Right now we have a proclamation recognition of National Public Health Week. Miss Lori Brewster is supposed to receive it, and Council Lady Nicole Ackley, could you read it, please?
Is Ms. Brewster here?
There she is.
Oh, hey, Lori. I would like to take a moment of silence. You want me to?
Just want her to go to the podium. Got to have social distancing.
Okay. Sorry. I would like to take a moment of silence in remembrance of those who have passed due to COVID-19. Thank you. Whereas the week of April 6th through the 12th, 2020 was National Public Health Week. Since 1995, the American Public Health Association has educated the public, policymakers, and public health professionals about issues important to improving the public's health. And whereas public health professionals help communities prevent, prepare for, withstand, recover from the impact of a full range of health threats, including disease outbreak and prevention. Whereas public health action today with scientific and technological advances has played a role in reducing the spread of infectious disease. And whereas 60% of Americans live with preventable diseases and preventable health risks, such as smoking, obesity, are the primary reason for deaths in the United States. I would like to thank Ms. Brewster for her work with the governor's office to ensure Wicomico County is following the guidelines to keep our citizens safe during this pandemic. Ms. Brewster, we are truly blessed to have you. Now, therefore, the Wicomico County hereby proclaim the week of April 6th through the 12th, 2020 as National Public Health Week in Wicomico County, and calls upon the citizens of Wicomico County to better understand the value of public health. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. I want to say that we were unable to have our annual public health ceremony. We were at our peak in this county with COVID-related activities. which I will go into further detail later in the session. You have a very large group of people that are dedicated and performing work related to public health activities every day in the office and outside of the office, doing a lot of teleworking. So thank you very much for the proclamation.
Thank you, Ms. Brewster. Brewster, you can pick this up.
Okay.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Wayne Strasburg to come inside. I'd like to offer a certificate of appreciation to Mr. Wayne Strasburg for his years of service to Wicomico County. The County Council of Wicomico County, it is with great pleasure that the members of the Wicomico County Council extend this certificate of appreciation to Wayne Strasburg, Director of Administration, from February 16th, 2012 to June 30th, 2020. For your leadership and dedicated service to the citizens of Wicomico County, Maryland, while ever striving to exercise professionalism, good judgment, and fairness. We thank you for your ability to anticipate the needs of your community and your grace, and for the grace that you extend to the council, staff, and citizens. Done the 16th day of June, 2020, signed by all members of the Wicomico County Council. Thank you, Mr. Strasburg.
Thank you, President Dodd. It has truly been an honor to serve this county, and I am really grateful to have had the opportunity to do so. There are a tremendous number of very committed, very talented people, not only inside county government, but throughout this community as a whole, who work very hard every day to make Wicomico a much better community, and I wish all of you well. These are interesting times, and we'll continue to have challenges. I know we have people that can meet those challenges, and I'm just very happy to have been able to serve during the time that I did. So thanks very much again.
Thank you, Mr. Strasburg. Here you go, Wayne. Might as well get it on the way out.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.
Okay, Ms. Hurley?
Okay, good morning, Mr. President, council members, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin this morning, I would like to announce there are a couple of changes to today's agenda. First, we received a request from Sheriff Mike Lewis to withdraw the resolution number 45-2020, which is declaring Wicomico County a Second Amendment Preservation County, from the agenda. The other agenda change is the work session to discuss the right-of-way agreement with Delmarva Power and Light Company will be postponed to a future meeting date. The first item on the agenda this morning is resolution number 39-2020, declaring that Leonard Lane Investment LLC is eligible to receive enterprise zone benefits for property located at 232 Leonard Lane in Salisbury, Maryland. In order for a business to qualify for enterprise zone benefits, it must meet one of the two statutory requirements, which are that the business must either make an investment in capital improvements of more than $50,000, or they have to hire new employees since they have located in the zone. Leonard Lane Investment LLC is eligible for the enterprise zone benefits because of its investment of more than $50,000 in the property. And we do have Laura Soper here, the City of Salisbury Enterprise Zone Coordinator, if there are any questions.
Okay, I need a motion to approve resolution number 39-2020 and a second.
So moved.
Got a motion, and who?
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second, Mr. Hastings. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Thank you very much. Ms. Hurley?
Okay, and the next item is another enterprise zone application. This is resolution number 40-2020, And this is declaring Opportunity Street LLC eligible to receive enterprise zone benefits for property located at 218, West Main Street, Salisbury, Maryland. And this business also qualifies because of its investment of more than $50,000 in the property since it has been located in the zone.
All right, need a motion to approve resolution number 40-2020 in a second.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Hurley.
Okay, next for your consideration is Resolution Number 41-2020. This is to authorize the County Council to engage the services of Timothy F. Maloney, Esquire, and the law firm of Joseph Greenwald and Locke, PA, to aid in inquiries, investigations, or the drafting or codification of legislation pursuant to Section 304C of the Wicomico County Charter.
All right, need a motion to approve resolution number 41-2020 in a second. Need a motion.
So moved.
Got a motion. Do you have a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Who made the second?
I did. Second.
You got it? Okay. Any discussion?
Yes, I do. I'm not going to support this, and I want to explain why. If you go to the page 4 of the letter from the attorney, they discuss the liability for bringing suit, and the word in there that as far as public expenditures and personal liability is unlikely. It doesn't say it's will not happen. It says it's unlikely. The next third paragraph on that page, it talks about them getting paid, and I'll read that one paragraph. The more practical problem here is to be the following: because the executive branch controls the county treasury and disbursement of funds, the administration may well simply decline to disburse funds for attorneys retained by counsel, even if authorized by law. This risk seems to be very probable. Now, what that means is the county executive just might not pay the bill. These attorneys are going to want to get paid, and they're going to look for the low-hanging fruit to get paid from. So when all this is said and done, whether we win or lose, they're going to want to get paid, and they're going to go after whoever they think they can get paid from. So I don't think this council person doesn't want to be liable for this. And the other matter is, we could have taken care of this problem 2 weeks ago when we voted for the budget. However, the budget was amended as the budget was written originally. The funds would have taken the funds out of that budget as we had written them originally, would have solved this problem. But the budget was amended, and those funds were put back in. So now we want to hire a lawyer and pay money for a lawyer, taxpayers' money. So I'm not going to be able to support this.
Any more discussion?
Mr. Taylor, as legal counsel, do you concur with Councilman Holloway's suggestion that the individual council members could be liable?
I don't think that the way this is structured, that the individual council members would be, he would have a suit against, or the law firm would have a suit against the county because it's a county obligation. So I don't think there's much risk individually. I can't guarantee that.
Can you speak up, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, I can't
Thank you.
guarantee that, just as he can't guarantee, as he's put in his letter. But I don't think he's speaking of the individual council members when he's on page 4 of his letter that was referred to. So, I mean, that's the best I can tell you. I think the risk individually of council members is pretty minimal, but,
Okay.
Did you say minimal?
yeah.
Any more discussion?
But the risk is still there.
I can't tell you that there's no risk. I mean, I'm
All
not,
right.
I don't have a divining
Okay.
rod.
That's
Last
fine.
time I checked on Amazon, they didn't sell them.
That's fine, thank you.
Mr. Hastings?
addressing the second part of Mr. Holloway's comments regarding the potential for the bills to not be paid by the current process with which the bills would be paid, is it worth going back to the attorneys to try to restructure any more of what is currently before us, or do we have, or is that just going to be kind of expected to be the way that things would go? And maybe I'll ask that, to direct that to our council attorney. If it's,
Well, I think that would certainly be possible. I think that could be done before or after the engagement is approved. I mean, at the moment, he hasn't incurred, we haven't asked him to do anything, he hasn't incurred any fees. But we could probably do that in a day or two to make absolutely clear that there's no intention, if he does not get paid by the county because the county executive refuses to write the checks, that he won't come back against the council members.
Does that answer your question? Any more discussion? Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor of resolution number 41-2020, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Just one nay. Chair votes aye. The resolution passes not unanimously, but 6-1. Thank you. Ms. Hurley.
The next item for business is resolution number 42-2020. This is to appoint the Board of Managers of various public drainage associations within Wicomico County. I will not read all the names, as the majority of these individuals are reappointments, unless council wants me to.
Okay, need a motion to approve resolution number 42-2020.
so move.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor of resolution number 42-2020, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye, passes unanimously. Ms. Hurley.
Okay, next is resolution number 43-2020. This is to certify the drainage tax roll to the Department of Finance as requested by the Board of Managers of the Public Drainage Associations. The proposed resolution shows the amount per acre for crop, wood, and the amount of the tax levy for each drainage association.
Okay, need a motion to approve resolution number 43-2020 in a second.
So moved.
Got a motion, need a second. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor of resolution number 43-2020, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye, passes unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Hurley.
The next item for your consideration is resolution number 44-2020. This is authorizing the county executive to accept a grant from the Administrative Office of the Courts on behalf of the Circuit Court for Wicomico County, and that's grants plural. And we do have the Circuit Court Administrator, Melissa Beatty, here if there are any questions.
Need a motion to approve resolution number 44-2020 in a second.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor of resolution number 44-2020, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Thank you very much. Ms. Hurley.
Okay, resolution number 45-2020 has been withdrawn per Sheriff Lewis's request. So next for your consideration is resolution number 46-2020, and this is authorizing the county executive and council president to execute on behalf of Wicomico County a mutual aid agreement between Wicomico County, Maryland, and all governing bodies and sheriffs on the eastern shore of Maryland to provide mutual aid and support between each sheriff's department in certain situations. And we do have Sheriff Mike Lewis here.
All right, need a motion to approve resolution number 46-2020 in a second.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Can we get him to explain what this
Yes,
is?
Sheriff, please.
Mr. President, I submitted this original resolution for the Second Amendment back in February
Yes, sir.
of this year. It remained in the county executive's office for nearly 8 weeks. The County Executive, everybody in this room knows he's suffering some serious medical setbacks at this time. When it finally made it to the council for consideration here, it was shortly before the events unfolded out in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Everybody knows what happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota was horrific, was despicable, one of the absolute worst cases of police brutality I've ever seen. I've watched our country suffer. I've watched this community suffer. And I realized in the last 3 weeks from several emails that I've digested, from several phone calls that I've fielded, from the expressions of many in our community, as I travel to and from different locations here in the community. But most recently, last night, at an event held here in the county, a unity rally that was held at First Baptist Church over on Booth Street. And I listened once again to the concerns of some of the residents in this area. And I think to pass a resolution like the Second Amendment resolution at this time would be insensitive and unacceptable. And I would like to request that this resolution be withdrawn and postponed.
It has been, thank you. Now we're on the mutual aid agreement.
Mike, I appreciate that, because we all know you've sat before this council before, and you were very vocal, and you are a proponent for, or advocate for Second Amendment rights, and we appreciate that. You know, my position is you're the one who's most impacted by this, and probably anyone else in the county, you and your deputies.
No doubt about it. Mr. Cannon, I will remain a strong advocate for our constitutional rights, period, but especially our Second Amendment right, which is really the only constitutional right that remains under fire across this country today. As you well know, we had a case in the U.S. Supreme Court yesterday involving our Second Amendment.
Right.
So I will remain an advocate and a staunch defender of our Second Amendment right, but I certainly recognize our community's pain right now and their concerns and why it's important that we postpone this at this time.
And I appreciate that, because I do recognize, you know, what position you are in regard to this. And I think it's very emblematic of your leadership, Michael, and what you've done for this county over the last 14 years as far as recognizing what's best for the community at the time and still acting as you know, in accordance to that. So again, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
And you should be commended for stepping up to the plate and recognizing the sensitivity of this situation, so thank you for that. Any more comments on the Second Amendment?
I've already talked to him about it.
If not, we'll go to the mutual aid. Okay, Mr. Holloway.
Mike, you know, I think there was a lot of anticipation today that we would vote for this, or it would be voted on. I wouldn't say vote for it, but voted on. Like you said, the things that have transpired in the past couple of weeks, I can understand where you're coming from on this, and we're not removing this completely from the table. I guess we're taking it off the table today, and it'll be reviewed at a later date, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Sheriff Lewis, the Second Amendment group that was advocating for it and the
Ms.
group,
Ackley, can you pull your mask down?
Oh, okay.
It sounds muffled.
the Second Amendment group that was advocating and the group that was opposed, they had met last night and had come to an agreement on some verbiage changes in the resolution.
It was my understanding via an email that I actually read after 11 p.m. last night. I was out very late last night here in the county. That they had reached an agreement. They had reached a compromise. They wanted to submit amendments to the resolution. And I responded to that email this morning that if they were to submit amendments to that resolution, it would likely have to go to our county attorney for a legal sufficiency review before it could ever be voted on. That would be the fair and equitable thing to do to for our community.
So I'd like to commend you for bringing the community together to be able to do that. That's amazing.
It's my pleasure, ma'am. We've got to work together more now than ever.
And I'd like to commend both groups for working things out or trying to work out a compromise, and it sounded like they did at the last minute last night, and then we got your request, so we're complying with your request, and thank you again.
That email came in sometime last night, but I certainly never read it until after 11 p.m. And as you all well know, I sent my email to every council member here at 11:41 p.m. last night.
I didn't
Thank
see
you
it
all
till
so
this
much.
morning. Okay, thank you. Any more comments? All right, now can we talk about the mutual aid agreement?
Absolutely. Madam State's Attorney?
Have a seat, young lady.
Good morning, all. Thanks for having us.
Introduce yourself.
Jamie Dykes, State's
For the
Attorney for
record.
Wicomico County.
Thank you.
This mutual aid agreement is something that we've had other mutual aid agreements throughout the years. We have new sheriffs, we have new chiefs across the Eastern Shore, and I have been called upon a number of times in the last several weeks by sheriffs and most recently Chief Brazzaro over in Ocean City, wanting our assistance to help disturbances that they have experienced in Ocean City. And we have also been called upon most recently utilizing our canines out of the county for search. One was search and rescue, and one was searching for a gun in another county. And Caroline County had one of their bloodhounds en route to us just last week for a lost child up in Sharptown. And they had a bloodhound en route to us to assist with that. We don't have any updated MOU in place to assist for criminal investigations, drug investigations, canine deployment, or civil unrest in our community. This would afford every sheriff on the entire Eastern Shore, from Cecil County all the way to Somerset County, the ability to pool our resources and pull from one another. And we compiled a list, every sheriff across the Eastern Shore, of all of our resources to include our canines, criminal investigators, drug investigators, and munitions in the event we needed the equipment to assist one another. We recognize that we can't do it alone. We simply cannot do it alone. We have, as you well know, and it's been heavily reported that law enforcement officers are leaving the job in droves right now. So we have to have the ability to pull from one another. And this MOU is not new. There have always been MOUs in place, but this particular MOU affording the sheriffs the ability to call on one another for operational procedures in our county. This will give us the ability to do that, and I think Madam State's Attorney can elaborate on the legal issues involving such an MOU.
You have 8 counties listed here. Do they have MOUs already? Has their councils voted on MOUs?
They not only have this exact MOU, which was drafted and put together by Deputy State's Attorney Billy McDermott of the Wicomico County State's Attorney's Office, under the guidance of Madam State's Attorney Jamie Dykes, seated to my immediate left. But that same MOU has been submitted and reviewed for legal sufficiency by Carl Zacharias of the Maryland Attorney General's Office, who gave us the green light instantaneously after he reviewed it. He said, whoever did this did a fabulous job. It covers everything. And a number of counties have already submitted it and for review to their councils and to their county executive.
Do we have this same type of MOU with other local jurisdictions within the county, or do you not need those?
We don't need those within the county, just outside of the county.
Okay.
But this will be the first of its kind involving all the sheriffs.
Okay.
Something that we've never done involving solely the sheriffs.
Okay. One more question, I'll leave you
Sure.
alone. Do you do this sort of thing with other municipalities outside the county?
We do.
Okay.
Happened with Princess Anne, Pocomo, Laurel, Delaware.
Okay.
It's not unusual for me to send a dog up to Dover, Delaware to assist
Okay.
in a case up there.
All right.
Ms. Dykes,
Yes, we are absolutely supportive
speaking to the mic.
of the mutual aid agreement. We were instrumental in the review, and I just note that proper preparation prevents poor performance. That's what this is. That's what this is. Sheriff Lewis is charged with public safety and enforcing the laws of this state. With resources low in many jurisdictions, and we anticipate them being lower in terms of those who are willing to put themselves out there and be law enforcement officers in a crisis, a critical or complex incident, the strain on our resources can be untenable. Dependable, responsive resources are a must. At this time, unless you have questions for me, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy State's Attorney Billy McDermott to talk about the legal issues. It's my understanding that Mr. Taylor had some concerns. I believe we can rectify all of those today.
Thank you, Ms. Knight.
If I
Thank
could
you, Madam
address those
State's Attorney.
first, I think it might be helpful. The procedural aspect of it, and the problem or the issue arises under the state enabling legislation. And what that provides is it depends on the type of governing body that a county has. In the case of a county council in a charter county with no executive, then the council has essentially blanket authority. However, it provides that where it's a county executive and county council in a charter county, then the governing body has to act as essentially a group, both. Now, the other counties that Sheriff Lewis mentioned, with one exception, that's Cecil County, are either not charter counties, and in non-charter counties, it's just the commissioners, similar to what would be in a charter county that has no executive. It would be the council. But, so they can act without that dual aspect to it, because there is no executive in those counties, with that one exception. Now, there is a Attorney General's opinion of about 15 years ago under this same section involving a charter county with a county executive. It happened to be Montgomery County. And the question was asked there how they go about adopting this type of a agreement. And in Montgomery County, at that time, there was a provision in their county code that allows the county executive to adopt the agreement, and then it's just approved by the council. Again, they have that duality, but in essentially two different stages. The opinion kind of came down that, well, that was okay because they have that in their charter, in their code. We do not have that in our code. I understand from Ms. Hurley that in 2013, legislation to do that was considered by the council, but it was not, apparently was not introduced, and it certainly has not been adopted. The only mutual aid agreement that we could find since we've shifted to the county executive system, which was in 2006, is an agreement with Fruitland and Salisbury. Now, this particular enabling legislation, this section 2105, it applies when a jurisdiction is authorizing its personnel, police force or other personnel, to go beyond the boundaries of the jurisdiction, which of course this one does. So I think because of that, and because of that Attorney General's opinion, I believe that an ordinance is required to do this. So there's two ways I guess the council could go. They could either adopt this today as proposed, and if you do that, I would strongly suggest you come back and do an ordinance as quickly as possible, and that will essentially solve the problem in a longer-term scenario. Or you could just table it and do the ordinance. Now, that's probably going to take another couple council meetings. So that's the overlay of this particular procedural aspect of this. I have some other suggestions generally about the agreement, but they're not procedural. This is procedural.
Mr. McDermott, for the record, can you introduce yourself?
I can. Thank you, Mr. President. William McDermott, Deputy State's Attorney for Wicomico County. And Mr. Taylor, I received the memo that you had circulated prior to the hearing this morning, and I was able, I think, to address all of your concerns. You noted your first one, but I think I've addressed all three of them. I've put together a PowerPoint only because it helps me. I'm a visual learner, and so I was hoping that it would help the council. It's short and shouldn't take me too long to get through, but I think addresses Mr. Taylor's concerns. What I'd like to start with any case, I'll ordinarily start either an opening or a closing by talking about those things to which we have consensus. Let's agree that Mr. Taylor's concerns, as he's just noted, are procedural in nature. It's not an opposition generally to the idea that mutual aid is a good thing, as described by the sheriff, because it is. Mr. Taylor's concerns via the memo are threefold. One of which he just spoke about, which is whether or not the vehicle should be an ordinance or a resolution. I'll note that the way that question is framed is it doesn't have to be one or the other. There's a second alternative, which is that Mr. Taylor could be right, and there could be a second option. Should the county have oversight, which is also contained within Mr. Taylor's motion, and also whether or not the liability immunities are too detailed within the current instrument. I want to go straight for the ordinance versus resolution. Mr. Taylor just noted the controlling statute. This is Crim Pro 2105. As you can read from it, this is the statute governing mutual aid agreements. It defines government body. As you'll note, Wicomico County would fit into the first description there. That is the county executive and county council. Now, interestingly, and what I want to point out, which Mr. Taylor just pointed out, is that the circumstances governing or going beyond the county by action in the regular routine for legislative enactment. So the question becomes, what does that mean? As Mr. Taylor has pointed out, and this is straight from Mr. Taylor's memo, he notes, although the state enabling legislation does not specify precisely what is meant by the phrase action in the regular routine for legislative enactment, this suggests that more than a resolution is needed. With all due respect to Mr. Taylor, I take issue with that statement. It's conclusory in that he says simply because it doesn't define it, that means there is more than a resolution needed. And Mr. Taylor goes on to cite the Attorney's General opinion, which I'll address in just a moment. But what I want to point out for right now is that legislative enactment does not equal resolution pursuant to the enabling legislation, but that was a conclusion that Mr. Taylor had noted, which is what I spell out over there. If we keep going, here's what we do. So in legislative principles, if we don't have a definition within the state statute, we have to look for other controlling statutes. So let's just go straight to our own Wicomico County Code. The legislative powers in the Wicomico County Code apply to all of you, and it spells out those things you can do. Essentially, you can create statutes or enact laws. And what's going to be important is when we talk about legal definitions, they may be different than the ordinary interpretation. So a law actually has a definition within your own code. I don't have to go through all of this, but basically what I just said holds true. You have the power to enact laws, and this is pursuant to Section 309. Now, here's where I disagree with Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor says because it says in the ordinary course of legislative action you need more than a resolution. If you look at the powers that you have as we sit here right now, you have the power to enact public local laws. To know what that means, we of course have to define what a law is, which seems silly to normal people, but this is the process and the analysis that lawyers have to go through. So I went to Section 1101 of the Wicomico County Code. As you will note, and Mr. Taylor argues that it needs to be an ordinance and not a resolution, but if you actually look at the definition of resolution, which is, I believe I circled it, but it's number 4, the word resolution shall mean a measure adopted by the council having the force and effect of law, but of a temporary or administrative charter. So if you look at this, what it actually says, what your code says, is that a resolution is a law. If you look at the definition of law within this, it tells you that a law is a legislative act, which is the exact same words that the enabling statute that Mr. Taylor characterizes it says. Therefore, resolution equals a legislative act. I'm going to note something here that I'll note in just a few slides later. In my opinion, and though it is limited, I'm a criminal prosecutor and that's my job, that's all I do, and Mr. Taylor has much more experience, but I believe that a resolution is a far better vehicle for this, for exactly the reason Mr. Taylor says, because it's temporary. If you pass an ordinance, and Mr. Taylor, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you pass an ordinance and say the sheriff no longer wants to be a part of this mutual aid agreement, this body is going to have to act to repeal it, whereas a resolution gives you the flexibility in that it is a temporary law pursuant to your code. It's actually really well written and designed exclusively for this purpose. Okay, so Mr. Taylor says, but hold on, there's an Attorney General's opinion. It's different. So under the, and this is straight from Mr. Taylor's, he quoted this, and this is straight from his memo. Under the county charter, enactment of an ordinance involves the participation of both the county executive and county council. In our view, either of these mechanisms would satisfy the requirement of 2105E that the county governing body enter into this agreement. On the other hand, a council resolution alone that did not involve any action by the county executive would not satisfy the terms of the statute. So that's within Mr. Taylor's memo. What I'm going to note is that in this particular quote, the Attorney General notes that the resolution alone, without the participation of the executive, is the gravamen of their problem. If we are in kind of statutory analysis, it's pretty frequent that if a prosecutor comes to, or any lawyer comes to a court, and he says, I have this case on point, Smith v. State stands for my proposition, the first thing the judge is going to ask you about is the facts. Well, the facts of this Attorney General opinion are far different than what we are going on, because in this particular circumstance, the MOU that was proposed did not include participation by the executive, making it very different from what we're talking about today. So, the AG's opinion concerned a resolution that did not seek the approval from the executive, so it's not synonymous to what we're talking about right now. Also, I'll note that it's not a joint resolution. Also, I did a little bit of digging, and I may be wrong about this, but I tried to look as hard as I could, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. Montgomery County Code seemingly does not use the same definitions for resolution, law, and ordinance the way you have chosen to define it, which is also a very big difference in that particular Attorney General's opinion. But what I think is most telling about that AG's opinion is this, because this is what we would call the holding, and this is what the AG's opinion says. This is the law. In our opinion, the county may enter into a mutual aid agreement by enacting a law approving the agreement or by taking other appropriate action, i.e. a resolution, under county law that involves the participation of both the county executive and the county council. Approval by a resolution of the county council alone would not be sufficient. We're not coming and asking for a resolution approved just by you. We're coming and asking for a joint resolution, which is something that this body has done before. Now, Mr. Taylor's point to that matter is that unlike in Montgomery County, you don't have a statute that allows the executive to enter into mutual aid agreements, that's a paragraph from Mr. Taylor's memo. While he is correct that there is not a specific one, I will note, if we go back to the code, Section 402, Executive Powers and Duties, subsections D and F. The county or the executive has the power to recommend to the council such measures for legislative action as he may deem to be in the best interest of the county, to which I believe the sheriff would certainly agree that this is one of those. But most importantly, in the controlling subsection is Section F, signing or causing to be signed on the county's behalf all deeds, contracts, and other instruments. I think legally we could argue this is a contract, but it's certainly an instrument, providing, however, that any agreement with the municipality to enforce laws within the jurisdiction, the second part doesn't apply. But the first part of that sentence gives the executive to enter into an agreement regarding an instrument. Okay, so back to my original point. The resolution as it sits currently before you, as you can see very clearly, has a signature block for Mr. Culver, has a signature block for the sheriff, has a signature block for the county council president, bar, of course, pending the approval of the resolution. Right. This is what is known as a joint resolution, as it seeks both the executive and the council's approval. So, at the end of the day, my conclusion, my opinion is that a resolution or an ordinance are going to be sufficient. However, a resolution seems to be the better vehicle because it accounts for this agreement being temporary in nature. And I'm concerned what would happen if the sheriff wanted to get out of the agreement for whatever reason. He would have to come to this council, and this council would have to approve that removal. I'll go through these very quickly because Mr. Taylor didn't raise them orally today, but they're contained within his memo. I'm very concerned about this particular paragraph. Well, strike that. If there is an ordinance, or if this council decides there is an ordinance, obviously the mechanisms for making an ordinance are spelled out in the code. That's section A233. It would be a very easy fix. I've already done that, and I could submit that. If the council would like, I can submit that to the council in an ordinance form. This is the paragraph that I was perhaps most concerned about because the vehicle, the process of this is something that lawyers can certainly disagree about, but this is where I have grave concerns. Mr. Taylor notes in his memo to the council whether the county should have some oversight. I think there are a number of practical problems with the council having oversight of a sheriff's decision in a time of emergency to request aid from another jurisdiction. I don't think that reporting requirements are necessarily a bad thing. I think you should be able to keep track of how many times we utilize this agreement, and to the extent I'm sure the sheriff would be willing to provide that information. I can't speak for him, but I'm sure that would be, statistics are never a problem and are welcome in the law enforcement community. But my biggest problem is the oversight component. The sheriff, as he sits here, is a constitutional officer duly elected by the people of Wicomico County. As such, this body cannot oversee those things which are in the exclusive jurisdiction of the sheriff, law enforcement, keeping people safe. That is something that I would have strong objection to being included in any resolution that deals with a constitutional officer. Lastly, I'm just going to note very quickly Mr. Taylor's objections to the liabilities. He notes that it seems duplicitous. It seems like we go through too many liabilities, enumerating them within the resolution. The only concern that I have with his concern is that if we look at a recent Attorney General's opinion, it actually spells out the statute requires that a mutual aid agreement contain certain provisions concerning liability and indemnifications related to the extraterritorial jurisdictional activities. So this Attorney General's opinion stands for the proposition that even though it seems self-evident that we have to actually put what those immunities are within the agreement itself, that a reference to them is insufficient. And so I would ask that at least that portion be contained the same. Lastly, I'll just note what Ms. Dykes already noted, and with that, time is of the essence, which is why I think a resolution is a better vehicle. It's temporary, it meets all of the obligations of the parties, and I hope, Mr. Taylor, that it's addressed your concerns.
Well, I can see that I've touched a nerve, obviously. I would say this. There is general law that distinguishes between resolutions and ordinances. I won't get into the details, but it's pretty well established state and, for that matter, national law on that. And essentially what Mr. McDermott has said, if you boil it down to its essence, is that resolution is the same as an ordinance. And you wouldn't have both if they were the same, and they're not under general law. I won't go through all of the details, as I said earlier. To me, there are two ways to handle it. Either adopt the resolution today, come back with an ordinance that would cure any potential problem, or table it and then do an ordinance. It's up to the council. If time is of the essence, if that is a very serious matter, then perhaps go ahead with the resolution. But I don't think that solves the problem under the state enabling legislation that I've discussed, and that is discussed in the Attorney General's opinion. The fact of the matter is, we proposed in 2013, to some extent, putting in the same type of language that they have in Montgomery County, Howard County, and I think other counties that have a county executive, that enables the executive to operate under that statute and just come back and get the council's approval. We didn't do that. So we're not in that same position as Montgomery County. And we have to live, I think, with what we've got. So that's my suggestion to you, and I won't go through the rest of it because we'd be here until noontime. And I really didn't come here thinking that we would argue this in great detail. But there are some concerns, and for example, I'll just go through one of them. Mr. McDermott suggested that I'm telling you that you should change and have oversight or do certain things. I simply said that you might want to consider it. So let's be accurate about things, Billy. Thank you.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
I won't respond entirely because I don't want to waste anybody's time, but to the extent that a nerve has been touched, I just want to respond to that generally. We're lawyers, and lawyers disagree all the time. I walk into a well all the time with people who are friends, who are opposing counsel, and we have differing views. Simply because we disagree doesn't mean you've struck a nerve. What I'm concerned about is what the sheriff so eloquently talked about before, which is there are actual stakes here. There are people's lives that are at risk, certainly law enforcement lives. To the extent that I am concerned that this body can move quicker and more efficiently, I am, and I take disagreement with what he says, particularly about resolution, ordinance, and law, because this council has the definitions right in front of them.
Thank you. Mr. Holloway.
Yes, I would suggest we move forward with the legislation, and if we want to review the ordinance issue, we work on that, see if that's where we need to head also. But I do have a couple other questions. Going back to the Second Amendment, I don't want to keep dragging that up. I know that's it's not a popular thing to talk about right now. But anyway, I did see a letter from Bob Culver endorsing that, but on this MOU, I don't see that letter. It's not in our packet. Is Bob Culver endorsing this MOU?
That is correct, sir. It was sent to him first.
But we didn't get.
He actually signed the document, so I treated that
Okay,
as the
you
endorsement.
treated that as an endorsement. Okay.
Correct.
All right, okay, that's
That's
fine.
a good point.
The other thing, and this is a liability question, has this been reviewed or discussed with our insurance company legit about our operations outside the county, how we're
It has.
covered?
Legit attends our monthly sheriff's meetings across the state of Maryland. And this is something that not only has been discussed with them, but they requested that we react on this as soon as possible.
React,
Proceed forward with it.
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And Sheriff Lewis, I want to point out that you mentioned that we already have mutual aid agreements in place.
With other
They're just
jurisdictions.
not updated.
Not updated, and they're not exclusively with the sheriffs on the Eastern Shore.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yeah.
Mr. Hastings?
Mr. McDermott, so once again, why the urgency?
So I think Mr. Sheriff has described that in great detail. Listen, my job here was to review the sufficiency of the resolution, to review Mr. Taylor's concerns. Sheriff Lewis has talked about this, and I'll echo his comments, and to the extent that I have witnessed it myself, I have. There are circumstances, and I'll point this out because I think it's important. The Maryland State Police have statewide jurisdiction. So one of the first phone calls that Madam State's Attorney wanted to make was to the Superintendent of the Maryland State Police to say, hey, listen, we don't want to step on toes. We want to make sure we're being good partners. How do you feel about this? Mr. Sheriff can talk about what the superintendent said, but the superintendent of the state police said, thank God, we need help. And should there be an emergency somewhere on the lower shore that we can't divert our resources to, thank God you guys are agreeing to work together. Mr. Hastings, I can't predict the future. I don't know what may happen. But as Madam State's Attorney had pointed out, preparing is always the best solution. And you wish you prepared when things go bad. I don't know what may happen, but I certainly trust the judgment of the sheriff of this county and the state's attorney when they say we need it.
Do you believe this is something that the public should have more input on?
I think the public should have input anytime a body considers something. But here's where I want to be careful and I want to be focused on the nuance of that question. To the extent that the county elected the sheriff to make determinations about public safety, well-being, and the criminal justice system, they elected the sheriff who sits to my right to make those decisions. If they don't like those decisions, there's remedy for that. However, in this particular instance, we're talking about a process question among law enforcement. And perhaps we get to a point, and as the sheriff had alluded to before, we are in changing times. We are in times where we are inviting people to the table and listening and having good conversations, and those conversations are beginning. But to the extent that this decision only allows police officers to act like police officers beyond what are truly imaginary lines between jurisdictions, that's all this does.
And speaking of individuals working together and coordination, yesterday on the steps of this building, we had the NAACP, the lower four counties come together, and part of what they included into their request was to have greater oversight. And now we're at another situation where it looks like there's not oversight or limited oversight. Are there ways that we could improve this to be able to make sure that there is greater oversight, given the national, we're at a kind of a fever pitch when it comes to a lot of racial tension, especially with law enforcement. And now we see something before us that basically says, there's not going to be oversight or very limited oversight. I completely understand the fact that you want to be expeditious in times when things are really needed, but balancing that with the fact that we don't really have great oversight when it comes to a lot of current police interactions. I don't know if there's anything you want to say on that.
It's a great, listen, I appreciate the question and I appreciate the way you framed it. And I want to answer it in a way that addresses your issues. But I guess can I ask you a question, and maybe it helps me answer your question. When you say oversight, in this particular instance, right, a mutual aid agreement, where would, in your opinion, the opportunity for that oversight be?
I'm definitely not in the law enforcement. I work in conservation, grew up on a farm, so that's my realm. Maybe Mr. Ernie might be better at that. But in general, I don't really know enough. But I do know that the public doesn't. I can't go home and turn on the TV without seeing something that doesn't say, the lack of oversight or a lack of communication between two different bodies. Namely, the main reason why the Second Amendment resolution was pulled today.
And so now I think I understand it better. We have to separate those into categories, right? So there's oversight by the public, and then there's oversight by this body. When I address the oversight concern, as I think Mr. Taylor, and Mr. Taylor, if I mischaracterized it, I do apologize. I thought I framed it as a question. What Mr. Taylor was asking, should this body have oversight? This body. That's a constitutional issue. That's a legal issue that needs to be addressed and can't be squared simply by talking about it. It's a legal principle. To the extent that you're talking about public oversight, there's always an opportunity for public oversight. And I think that there are places within laying out the statutory formation of things that they can have oversight, that opinions can be voiced, opportunities to be heard can be expressed. I was only saying my opinion regarding the constitutional clash between this body and the sheriff. That's all.
Last piece, Mr. President.
Mr. Dodd, I have a general comment and a general question, if I may. General comment is there's a...
Mr. Taylor, sorry, I think Mr. Hastings still had the floor.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you
No,
said you...
I'll defer.
Yeah. Okay. General comment is there's a article that's been done by the legal counsel of Legit, their in-house legal counsel, not a law firm that they use, on the legal relationship between counties and sheriffs. I would suggest that everybody look at it. I think Laura has a copy of it. She can email it. You have that, don't you, Laura?
Sure,
It's
she can
very
send
well
it to us.
done, and it gets into the weeds, and I won't do that. I'm just making a general, bringing it to your attention. My general question is, and maybe Sheriff Lewis can answer this if he's been talking to Legit, I don't know, I couldn't understand from the enabling legislation if a deputy from out of the county, say in this county, then commits an act for which there would be liability, whose insurance handles it? Is it the county that he's employed by? And that may or may not be Legit, because not every county has Legit insurance. Some have other insurance. Or would it be this county?
Sheriff?
And you just don't know. I couldn't tell from this.
I thought it stated that the county of that officer was responsible, Mr. Taylor.
That's my guess, but I couldn't really tell loud and clear how that operated.
Sheriff Lewis?
That is precisely what I would say as well, Mr. Cannon, that the county which that officer is representing will be responsible for that civil liability.
And that's contained within the resolution. And it's also, I think, probably why the Attorney General notes that we spell those types of things out within it.
Mr. Holloway, did you have a question? I saw you bringing the mic close to you.
Ernie's had one for 20
Mr.
minutes.
Davis?
Just say we didn't pass this resolution. Say tomorrow something happened in the county upstate, and you send your deputies. What can happen?
I would certainly respond. We respond to Baltimore City because the governor had declared a state of emergency. That's a conversation you and I had earlier. That's why I was able to do that. Once the governor makes that declaration, I can send deputies anywhere in the state. However, sending deputies right now in the absence of any declaration of an emergency would be very risky. Would I do it? Yes, I probably would. But this provides this county with a blanket of security that an MOU affords all of us.
So, just say you did send a deputy, and something happened, so it would come back on the county to be sued because of this, what's in place?
Yeah, it could come back on the county, absolutely.
Mr. McCain?
I've got a couple questions or comments, and actually even a suggestion. Because I think we all agree that obviously all the sheriffs working together on the shore is a positive thing, and so I mean from that standpoint I think we all agree. The little bit of concern is, as you can see, this is a lot to digest. I mean, Mr. McDermott, I'll speak so you can have a chance to take a breath. It's a lot of information, and it's good information. Mr. Taylor shared with us information. There's obviously some concerns that I think we need to figure out. I think it's hard for us to figure this out. I mean, this was a last-minute add-on to the agenda, so we've had very little time to digest this. We've had some questions from the community and so forth, and I recognize that time is of the essence, and I recognize that. And I've got some concerns that I don't know how much detail we want to get into. I mean, I have some concerns just from a taxpayer standpoint. When we send resources to other counties, and I'll use our K-9 unit as an example. I mean, we have a very robust K-9 unit. Well, if other counties, sure, they want to use our resources that our taxpayers paid for, but there's nothing in this where counties compensate each other and so forth, and I sort of understand probably why, because we use their resources probably sometimes as well. But what's to prevent counties from, quote, taking advantage of us?
I can tell you neither I nor the citizens of Wicomico County were concerned about civil liability when the hundreds of law enforcement officers came in from across the country to participate in the search and rescue for Sarah Foxville when she was kidnapped in 2009. That is a prime example how law enforcement came from as far away as South Dakota to assist in the tracking of the suspect and trying to locate the body of this little girl. We worry about those things afterward. When we need to call on one another, it's very important to know that we're going to respond. This MOU affords us the blanket of security we need to do that with every county on the Eastern Shore. And that's all I'm asking, just affording us the ability to pull from one another and have those extra resources should the citizens of Wicomico County need it or any other county on the Eastern Shore need it. And that's important that we know that we have something in place that will allow us to do that.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I guess my only suggestion would be, I wouldn't mind seeing us just table this to the next meeting. I mean, set a specific date, not something we're just tabling. No, we table it to the next meeting just so we can digest the information that we've been presented with today. Because like I say, everything like Mr. McDermott's just presented to us, for example, that's our first time seeing that, so we're not getting the chance to discuss that, think about that, any concerns. And we have had some concerns from the public expressed, but once they see this, that might alleviate their concerns. But once again, they haven't had that opportunity either. So my suggestion would be that we just table it to the next meeting so that we are being time sensitive. And I don't think that's going to hurt anything just to postpone this or table it for one meeting.
Is that a motion?
Yeah. I'll put that in the form of motion.
A motion, is there a second?
Can I just clarify the motion is motion to postpone?
That would be a motion to table it to the next council meeting to vote on. And in the meantime, whether we change this from a resolution to an ordinance, it gives us that opportunity to, figure that out as well. Maybe Mr. McDermott and Mr. Taylor could get together during that time period to figure that out.
Yeah, I would feel better on that if that were possible, and to be able to have, I've gotten multiple emails in a very short period of time from a lot of folks who were kind of concerned. They didn't know what this was or what this looked like. One person character referenced this as a power grab, which, I doubt that is the case. It sounds like a very good intent to be able to try to have our counties work together. But this is something that we certainly need to have more than, this was put on the agenda at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and does include, I think does need to be aired more so.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion?
No discussion.
Yeah,
No discussion.
There is no discussion on the table.
I won't put a second to it if they want to continue discussion. There's a motion on the table. I don't know if you want to continue discussion. I won't second that at the moment. But.
Mr. Cannon?
As a matter of procedure, a motion's been made to table, and it requires a second.
There was a second.
Okay, then.
Not a second.
If there's no second.
Oh, it's not a second?
Nope.
Okay, I thought it was, is there a second? Okay, further discussion on the
I was just going
original.
to ask Mr. Taylor a question. You made the suggestion that we could go ahead and pass this today as legislation and come back with an ordinance. Does that pretty much say you're okay with this legislation as it is, but we still may need an ordinance?
Yes and no. I'm suggesting that you'd rather be safe than sorry.
Right.
In other words,
Cover your
if you
bases.
pass it today, I'd still come back and
Right. But you don't see anything with the legislation, wrong with the legislation, the way it's written, other than the fact that we may need an ordinance to.
I've made some suggestions. We're looking, I think, at just the procedural part of it now.
Right,
I've made
okay.
some suggestions as far as the
All right. I would-
provisions in the document itself are concerned, but that's a different matter.
Yeah, I would say we go ahead and pass it and let
Yeah,
Mr.
yeah.
I
I'm
have
like-
a question, Sheriff.
Ms. Ackley,
I just have one question for
will
Sheriff
you
Lewis.
mask down, please?
Sheriff Lewis. It's comforting that your department has not only body cameras, but also has car cameras. Do you know if the other counties also have these?
Some counties do, but most counties don't.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can tell you, in my conversations with other sheriffs in our monthly sheriff's meeting, every sheriff has introduced, through their county council, respective bodies, they want to have the proper funding to arm their deputies with body-worn cameras and in-car cameras.
Okay.
Yeah, I prioritized it years ago, shortly after my election, and it's been extremely beneficial to us throughout the years.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff, has the county been reimbursed for mutual aid before, such
We
as
have.
Baltimore? That's what I
Like
thought.
Baltimore, absolutely, fully.
Okay, so there are many instances that we will be reimbursed if you're utilized. Okay, thank you. Mr.
question.
McDermott, I do want to point out and thank you for speaking loud and clear. We didn't have to ask you to bring the mic close to your face. You were very clear. So
I
thank
can
you
do
very
one
much.
thing right, thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Any more discussion?
I had a question, if I could.
Yes, sir, Mr. Cannon.
In the first section of the resolution where it says authorizing, first of all, it says authorizing the county executive and the council president. We can't do that, unfortunately, Larry. It has to be the council as a whole. So we'll have to amend that. But is the meaning of this, Mr. McDermott, is the meaning of this that it would allow the executive and the council to give this authority in certain situations? Or is it saying it will allow the county to authorize mutual aid across the board once this passes?
So, thank you, Mr. Vice President. That's a very good question. It is generally, so it's the authority of the council, and as Mr. Taylor noted, it's the government, the body government, which is defined in the statute as section number 1. What this says is, by your approval, by the executive's approval, the sheriff may enter into the agreement, not the the continual exercising of the agreement.
So this resolution is attempting to say that, let's just say we kept it as it is.
Yes, sir.
This is saying that this would allow the executive and the president to call Mike Lewis and say, Michael, we give you the authority in this situation to participate, or is this resolution saying that the county as a whole authorizes Sheriff Lewis to do this at any point in time that he sees appropriate?
Very good question. So it is within the resolution itself, and also within kind of the body of mutual aid agreement law, there are definitions for emergency. Emergencies are spelled out. It's not limited to, but it gives you examples of what an emergency may be. It's contemplated by the statute that this agreement would be implicated in times of emergency.
Which would give the sheriff that right to make that decision.
Yes, sir.
Independently.
Yes, sir.
All right. First thing I'd like to do is entertain a motion to delete the phrase in the very first sentence, which says, the county executive and council president to execute on behalf of Wicomico County. We'll make a motion to strike that so that the resolution would simply read, a resolution of authorizing the mutual aid agreement between Wicomico County, Maryland, and all governing bodies. I don't think the text of the executive and the council president is relevant in that, and
Hey, John, just a quick question to that. I'm not sure, is it actually saying that, or is it just simply saying it's just authorizing them for us to enact this resolution? I don't think it's, I
that's
mean,
why
maybe Mr. Taylor can answer that. I'm not sure if it's saying,
that's why I asked for the clarification initially. From what I understand, this resolution will allow the county as a whole to authorize an MOU for the sheriff to engage when necessary. I don't think this is supposed to be a resolution that says that the county executive and the president will authorize on, when necessary, to have the sheriff go to another county. You follow me?
I'm agreeing with you. I'm just not sure if I'm interpreting it the same way. But I mean, I agree with your point.
My amendment proposes to strike that line to eliminate any confusion, and in doing so, it authorized Wicomico County to authorize mutual aid as a whole from here on out.
Mr. Cannon, did you want a response from Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, well, I just have an observation, really, that's all. I think the way this is drafted, I point out just at the very start, now this is both Wicomico and Cecil, which is the other county that has a county executive. And for those two counties, it is drafted, and I'll just read the very start for Wicomico. This mutual aid agreement made on this blank day of blank 2020 by and between Wicomico County, Maryland, a corporate and politic of the state of Maryland, by and through the county executive of Wicomico County, Maryland, and the county council of Wicomico County, Maryland. Now, that's the same verbiage as for Cecil with the name change. The other counties, Worcester County, for example, by and through the county commissioners, because they act only through the commissioners. They're not a charter county. So that's kind of point number one, and I think that particular formulation and the fact that at the end of the document, it's provided for signature by the president of the council is essentially supporting the position that Mr. McDermott takes. And I'm not saying for or against that, I'm just pointing it out. So I think that taking it out conceivably weakens that position. And I'm not suggesting that it should be taken out. I'm just pointing that out.
Mr.
Now-
Taylor, the president always signs for the body of the council.
Well, but
the body of the council
normally,
makes that decision.
normally the president doesn't sign agreements like this. In other words, as Mr. McDermott pointed out in the charter, it talks about the county executive signing deeds and instruments that involve the county. So this is abnormal or unusual in that sense.
Well, I'm not debating that, Mr. Chair.
I'm just
I'm not
pointing that
debating that,
out.
Mr. Taylor. On a regular basis, the council president always signs all documents, whether the resolutions or whether the legislative bills.
But this isn't signing a resolution or a bill, this is signing an agreement.
Right, but I'm not
For the
challenging
county,
that.
so it's different in that sense.
I'm not challenging that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that my motion is to strike the portion of the sentence that says the county executive and the council president to execute on behalf of Wicomico County. It's redundant. The statement of a resolution authorizing a mutual aid agreement between Wicomico County, Maryland, and all governing bodies is sufficient, and I think that's what it should state.
Well, but I think it's like pulling one brick out of a load,
No,
then the
that's-
others fall.
I appreciate that, but that's my
So,
motion.
But,
I need a second.
but to get to your other point, which is also, I think, significant, is how it would operate, the functional aspect, once it's signed, sealed, and delivered.
Right.
And yes, it does give, and I agree with Mr. McDermott, I think, that the operational or functional aspect of it is up to the sheriff. Now, the county can put it, if you want to, you could put something in. For example, just like the emergency declaration that was done a couple of months ago. Under the code, there has to be council oversight of that and continuation of it. You could do that if you want to. I'm not suggesting that you should or shouldn't, but you could consider that.
And I recognize that.
So that's another aspect of it. But I think the way it's been structured, you ought to leave it alone because it's been structured with that in mind. And I think, like I say, once you start pulling bricks out, then you're losing support for the rest of it. So that part of it, I don't have any problems with. Procedurally, I have that issue, but not within the context of the way it's been proposed by Mr. McDermott.
Mr. McDermott, did you
Well,
have a
the
comment on
introduction
that?
the introduction itself says introduced by the president of the council and the request of the county executive. So we've covered those bases. That's putting the brick right where it needs to be. I'm only saying that the resolution itself authorizes.
I didn't write it
between
this
Wicomico
way, and
County.
maybe Mr. McDermott can explain, but that's, I think, why they drafted it that way, because of the fact that this is a county executive county, like Cecil.
Mr. McDermott?
So it is drafted that way because it was my intention to recognize the different forms of government within that opening. Mr. Taylor notes like we do have different governing bodies. This is, to me, it's almost a stylistic question, and so like I take no opposition to your amendment. I'd certainly take into consideration what Mr. Taylor is saying because that's the reason I drafted it that way. But at the end of the day, if it's signed by this body and by the executive, it's of no moment what those words say. It's just, both points have weight in this conversation.
Mr. Hastings?
Sorry. No, I'll leave it at that.
No, I'm
There's
just
a motion on the
waiting.
table.
Mr. Cannon?
Yeah, there's a motion on the table. I'm just waiting for a second.
Is there a
I
second?
don't get it.
There's no second.
All right,
Okay.
then I have another amendment then.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Cannon.
A resolution authoring the county executive and the council president. I don't understand, I still don't understand that role of why it specifically assigns the president that responsibility. It should say a resolution authorizing the county executive and the county council. The county council never authorizes independent authorization for the president of the council. The council represents the county council when he signs or she signs any documentation. But you don't authorize your president to do something. In the way this is written, the president could call Mike Lewis and say, I want you to go over here. And yet this council should always act as a body, not with independent authority, just the president alone.
Mr. McDermott?
Yeah, so that is, again, that was this problem is my fault.
I understand.
And I'll take ownership of that.
It's a matter of familiarity.
Exactly. And so to the extent that if it included all of your signatures, that would be the prudent thing.
Well, I'm not even asking that. I'm
Okay.
just saying that the first line should not give the president that authority. I think, the president, it goes without saying that when the president signs, he signs for the council as a whole.
So is your amendment motion just to change where it says council president to county council?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I don't think that affects, that's.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
That's a good point.
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye. Okay. Any more discussion before we move on? All right. All in favor of
Mr. President.
resolution? I'm sorry. Did somebody say something?
Yeah.
Mr. Hastings, go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't want to take up any more time of the sheriff and Mr. McDermott. I do know that there's, it would be good to, I would feel better if we have more time to actually know that the public has looked at this, has understood what is here, and to fully make sure that our county attorney has worked together to make sure that this looks like something substantive. I'm glancing at page 1 and I see Dorchester County's not even spelled right. I want to make sure that we got a document that is finalized and that makes good sense and that we're all comfortable with. So for that sense, I'd motion to table this until the next meeting, until we can come back with some resolution that we're all comfortable with and the public has had a chance to digest this.
I got another motion on the table. Do we have a second?
I'll second it since I made the table motion earlier. So I got to second it after that. So now
I
I'll
thought
second
you
it.
made the original amendment. Okay, any discussion to this amendment? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Roll call. Well, I didn't hear, nobody spoke up loud enough. Did you catch everybody?
It sounded like it was half and half to
Just
me.
do ro- yeah,
John?
just do roll
Nay.
call.
Josh?
Aye.
Nicole?
Nay.
Bill?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
And chair votes nay.
Make a motion that we correct the spelling of Dorchester County.
So I don't know how you guys got that draft, but there are
Got a
two
motion?
revisions.
Do we have a second to
in
correct the
your draft
spelling?
you have. So we have,
It will be corrected.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, now all in
Thank you,
favor?
Mr. McDermott, for that, for that law lesson. That was excellent,
Yeah, I'm going to.
excellent explanation.
Nicole, I can't hear what you're saying. You just
She's talking to
interjected.
Mike.
You're soft-spoken.
Did you hear me?
I did.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you.
But I hope who's scribing this does. Anyway, moving on. All in favor of resolution number 46-2020, I'm going to have a roll call vote. Mr. Cannon?
As amended, yes.
Mr. Hastings?
Needs more time, nay.
Okay, Ms. Ackley?
Yes.
Mr. McCain?
I'm going to abstain. I think we need more time.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Davis?
I'm like Bill, I think we need more time. I'm gonna say no.
Okay.
Yes.
And the chair votes aye.
Mr. President, I'd like to reflect that to be an abstention. I do think we need more time. Just got
I
this
can't
info.
hear you.
I do think we need more time. I'm going to want that to be reflected in my vote as an
Yes,
abstention.
yes.
But I
And
appreciate the
Mr.
hard
Hastings
work.
said the same thing. The chair votes aye. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So it passes 4-3. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, that's all I have.
Okay. At this time, we're going to adjourn from legislative session and enter into the County Board of Health with
Thank you,
Ms.
Philip.
Brewster. A little rough there, aren't you, sir?
Just making sure there's no germs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, please bring the mic close to yourself. I don't know if you can speak as loud as the state's attorney.
So, thank you for inviting me. Wanted to give you an update on all things COVID. That seems to be our world right now. We are continuing with our COVID-19 response. Our stats as of yesterday for the state are 62,032 confirmed cases, 2,817 deaths, and 745 were currently hospitalized. Wicomico, as of yesterday, had 1,027 cases. We did go up today by 4 additional cases. We remain at 35 deaths, and we have 12 people hospitalized. We reached our peak with COVID back in the first part of April, and we've seen our numbers continue to skyrocket ever since. As the state has been doing for the past few months, they have been publishing online nursing home cases updated every Wednesday, so I thought I would give you those updates as well. Anchorage has 7 staff, 25 residents, and 4 deaths. Salisbury Rehabilitation and Nursing Center has 40 staff positive, 75 residents with 13 deaths. Wicomico Nursing Home has had 0 staff positive and 0 residents positive with no COVID-related deaths. All of the nursing homes were tested, universal testing, and we will be going back out and doing serial testing with them in the future. We know that this is the only way that the individuals that are residing in nursing homes will get visits from their loved ones. We are continuing our weekly testing in Wicomico County. Our next testing event is Friday at the Health Department on Carroll Street, the Fritz Building. We have been seeing a little bit of an uptick in our positivity rate in Wicomico County over the past couple of weeks, but we are still below the state average. Contributing to that at this point is we have seen a rise in the number of asymptomatic positives that were in Ocean City for Senior Week. So we have a lot of youth that are testing positive right now. And anyone that went to Senior Week in Ocean City, we're encouraging them to be tested. We're also encouraging anyone that's been in large groups over the past week to be tested, as they are at a higher risk of being positive due to being in contact with other individuals. With the governor's reopening process, we have been reviewing and fielding numerous calls as to what is and is not accepted, and also fielding complaints related to improper distancing, social distancing, and improper wearing of masks. We also are preparing our facilities for return of staff and what that's going to look like, as the governor and the Secretary of Health want us to continue with individuals teleworking when possible. As you may be aware, we had the Eastern Shore Poultry Task Force initiated by the governor. And for the Eastern Shore of Maryland, I was named the incident commander for that event. We are closing that work out, as we have had no new poultry cases in Maryland in quite a few days. We are ramping up for testing of migrant workers as they start coming into the counties. Most of them will arrive first part of July, and many of them reside in Somerset County but work in Wicomico County. We continue to do a lot of contact tracing, and what that means is for every individual that is a positive COVID-related case, we get information from them as to where they've been and who they've been in contact with in the past 2 weeks, and we make those phone calls and outreach to those individuals. We also are working with Peninsula Regional on communicating, Peninsula Regional and Atlantic General, and communicating to the public that it is okay to go to the hospital, because we have seen that people have delayed emergency care, and it's resulted in poor outcomes for the individuals in the, going into the hospital. One final note on the COVID issues, we're not out of the woods. If you look at reports out of China, where this began, they are seeing more cases than they saw during the first wave. Would continue to support people social distancing and wearing masks whenever possible. On other fronts, we are continuing with the opioid epidemic. We have seen an increase in our opioid-related calls as well as our opioid-related deaths, which has us very concerned. We're also seeing issues with significant depression in the community, so we're trying to do a lot of outreach with that. We continue to work on our established priorities of diabetes and behavioral health, working with the hospital currently on a HSCRC grant application that's due mid-July so that we can get additional services into Wicomico County as well as Somerset and Worcester. And just wanted to let everyone know that all of our environmental health services are operating. They have been operating since early April. We have people out in the field. We are contacting individuals prior to sending people out to make sure that they are not going to be around a large group of people, and they will be out in masks. I will end there. A lot of things happening, and I will tell you that you have an excellent group of people working in the health department trying to maintain services as well as adding on the COVID work that they're doing. So I want to say thank you to them.
All right, questions?
Yes. You mentioned Wicomico Nursing Home having 0 cases. As you may know or not know, I've always been a champion of that nursing home, thinking they've always done a great job. I know in the past we've had some discussions about whether Wicomico County should even be involved in that nursing home, but we are. So what did they do different than the other nursing homes? You know, older folks that go to nursing homes are, you know, all the same, you know,
Well, I think one of the things that we need to understand is they're a lot smaller than the other 2
Right.
nursing homes in the county. I do know that if they had individuals that were working in multiple places, other assisted living, they asked them to make a decision as to where they were going to work so that they did not bring COVID into the nursing home. Very early on, I met with all 3 nursing homes with the hospital, and we made sure that there was adequate PPE in each nursing home. And we have maintained that contact with all 3 nursing homes. And the other 2 have corporate structures that they get their personal protective equipment from, and Wicomico doesn't have that corporate structure, so we have been trying to keep them in PPE as much as possible.
Yeah, I too have been an advocate of the nursing home, Wicomico Nursing Home, for over 20 years, and it's good to hear that they have no cases. And I personally think it's one of the cleanest nursing homes in the county, because I've been in all of them, and you can tell the difference there. It may not be up to date, but I think the employees do a good job there. Ms. Ackley?
I have two questions for you. Are you, you said that you were working with different entities in reopening. Are you working with Wicomico County Public Schools to get these kids back in school? As I have 3 at home.
So we have been meeting, this week will be the second week that we're meeting with the public schools. It's a number of individuals meeting with public schools on their reopening plans,
Okay.
which are also coming out of the state superintendent's office.
Okay. And then I was wondering do you have outreach for non-English speaking population?
We do.
Okay.
We have contracts with various languages, interpreters, and we had them on site at all of our testing events, starting with the Purdue Stadium testing event. We had a large number of Spanish-speaking interpreters as well as Haitian Creole. We also had them at the testing event that occurred at Purdue. And we have them on hand at every testing event that we have.
What about for preventative measures? So we had the list of preventative measures given to us. It was in English, and I didn't see anything in Spanish or Creole.
It's all on our website. It's in
Okay.
Spanish and Haitian Creole.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ackley. Mr. Cannon?
You had said that encouraging people to get tested. At one point in time, the testing, I guess you had to have symptoms, or you had to have I guess maybe a note from a doctor or something to that effect. Is that not the status now? Is it more loosely structured?
So very early on, there was testing limitations due to testing availability. The Secretary of Health has expanded that testing guidance, and it includes people that have been in situations that creates concern, such as large groups, the youth that were at Senior Week, congregate settings. We know that the state prisons are currently undergoing mass testing of inmates as well as the correctional officers. So there has been a loosening of the testing guidance. One of the caveats in the guidance that I use for our testing events is the health officer can decide whether or not there is a concern in the community as far as asymptomatic positive individuals, and we know that they are there. So we have not required a doctor's note or a doctor's order because we have a standing order from our physician deputy health officer for that, and you do not have to be symptomatic.
So I guess it would go without saying that we don't have a shortage of test kits then.
I can't say there's not a shortage of test kits, but we are in a whole lot better shape than we were very early on. Very early on, I only had 50 test kits, and that was for about probably close to 4 weeks. And then we had the very large testing event at Purdue Stadium, which was the first in the state of Maryland large testing event like that. They are now doing that at Six Flags in Prince George's County. So we're getting more test kits, and we actually are in a weekly allocation at this point, but if we don't utilize all of our testing supplies, they will go back. And I will say that the need and the desire for testing has begun to decline throughout the state, but I have not seen that in Wicomico County. Every appointment that we set up for testing, people have filled the appointments. In fact, last week we had a testing event on Wednesday, and we had so many people asking for testing, we opened up another testing event on Thursday.
Okay, well, I don't have the opportunity that often to publicly thank you for the work that you do, but I would have to say thank you on behalf of the Wicomico County, because you have literally kept Wicomico County together, health-wise. You have Wicomico as a responsibility, you have Somerset as a responsibility. They made you an incident commander as if you didn't have enough to do. I don't know how you slept in the last 4 months, but again, you've done a fantastic job. The coordination and all the efforts have been fantastic, and you've saved lives by doing that. So I'd like to thank you. Mhm.
Thank you. Mr. Hastings, did you have something?
I just want to say I second that. Yeah, totally. You did a fantastic job so far. I'm really proud of your work.
Well, thank you. We are preparing for Wave 2, and that gives me grave concerns with the seasonal flu impacts with COVID as well. So I'm trying to get my staff to take some time off now to rest and recuperate. They were working 7 days a week, 12 and 14-hour days. And there was an article just recently in a national publication about individuals in public health positions being threatened by the public and having to have a security detail. And I feel fortunate that we have not had that issue in Maryland, especially in Wicomico County.
Any more comments?
Question.
Mr. Davis.
When you mention cases in Wicomico, what does that really mean?
So a case at this point is someone that has been tested and tested positive. That does not include people that are symptomatic and at our home, because we know that there are people that will have symptoms of COVID, but they will not get tested. I probably would be one of them very early on, because I did not want to have the nasal swab done. But I will say that the numbers are probably larger than what's being reported, because that's only those that have been physically tested and the results have come back.
Okay, so they've been tested and results come back with it. Does it ever say, if say I was tested and I had it, does that stay with me for life, or does it go away?
You will not test positive forever. You will test positive as long as you have the virus in your system. But you can be tested today and be negative, and be tested tomorrow and you could be positive.
So those stats doesn't show those people that were tested and then the virus was gone.
Correct.
So this is just a number that keeps going up and up. It doesn't go back and say, well, these number of people do not have that symptom and that no more.
Correct. Now, we do report out on the numbers that have recovered, and that's what would catch those that tested positive, but they are have recuperated and are out in the community now without symptoms.
So in a way, that number is like misleading for and against the virus.
Well, that number is showing the number of individuals that in Wicomico County that have ever tested positive for the virus.
Yeah.
One other interesting tidbit is we look at the percentage of the population that's been tested, and Wicomico County is one of the highest as far as numbers tested, percentage of the population tested, only behind Somerset County. So our two counties on the shore are one of the highest percentage of population tested. We're close to 10%.
So you mentioned when you started, there were 4 additional cases. So are we at 1,027 or 1,031?
1,031 today.
1,031 and 35 deaths.
Yes.
I had to run out, so I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but I believe yesterday the governor noted that there had been no cases in the poultry industry in the month of June for the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
So that's positive for
Absolutely.
Wicomico.
Absolutely. Which is the reason why they are winding down the Eastern Shore Poultry Task Force that was established by the governor.
Okay.
We're still active, but it's the responsibilities have begun to wind down.
So that's good news for Wicomico.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Holloway.
The swab kits, how long do you keep those, and where are they stored?
Well, I'm only getting right now an allocation of about 100 a week. So I go through them on a weekly basis, and they are stored under lock and key in the health department.
The ones that you've already tested.
They are kept in a cooler that has ice packs in it, and they are picked up by the courier the same day as the testing events.
Okay, so what happens to them in the end after they've been tested?
The kits themselves?
No, the swabs.
They are destroyed at the lab.
They're destroyed at the lab?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. Because there was some concerns that, I was watching TV the other night, and there was some concerns that people's rights might be violated by being able to check them for DNA. And I was wondering, and they never really got into what happened to these kits, or not the kits, but the swabs themselves when they, so they're destroyed.
Yes.
Okay.
Any more comments?
Yeah, just a suggestion, Mr. Dodd. I believe the first half of the county's coronavirus relief fund money was divided, and half of it came to the health department. Might want to find out the status. Is that going to get them through? I think it has to be spent by the end of the year or sent back.
Can you update us on that?
So,
Sure. All of the coronavirus relief funds have been allocated to the health department. 9 million of those dollars are for public health expenditures. So that could be anything related to an EMS expenditure, hospital expenditure, or health department related expenditure, primarily for COVID. The other half of the dollars are for employers and small businesses in the community, and we are working with SWED to get those dollars out to the small businesses. We have an MOU with them at this point to release some of those dollars on a month, every other week or monthly basis, depending upon how quickly they get the grants out to the small businesses. So the full, it's a little over $18 million is coming to the health department to disperse. So not all of those dollars are for health department expenditures. Most of them will be leaving the health department. The state decided that these were federal dollars coming to the states, and they knew that the state knew how to manage the dollars in compliance with the federal audit requirements, and that's why it came to the health departments for dispersal.
Okay, Ms. Holloway?
Will the fire departments, the volunteer fire departments submit paperwork to you as far as reimbursements for COVID expenditures? Is that
Yes.
equipment and calls?
The calls, it really depends on whether or not that's an added expense. It cannot be, the dollars cannot be used to reimburse for an already budgeted item. That's where the federal government has drawn the line.
Yeah.
And they also will not allow the reimbursement of lost revenue related to COVID, which is where I'm having an issue in the health department with our fee-for-service programs at this point.
So I suppose all the fire departments know about this?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Has any submitted paperwork yet?
We have had expenditures, yes.
From the fire companies?
I don't know if they have been directly from the fire companies. How we're handling those is we're working with the Department of Emergency Services because they have some dollars as well. So we're trying to work with them to determine which is the best route as far as their federal grant dollars or the health department's CARES dollars.
Right, that was going to be my next question about the Department of Emergency Services, because I hear them dispatch in PUI, is that what it is?
Yes.
Person under investigation,
Yes.
which is a potential COVID case. So are they keeping track, the Emergency Services Department, are they keeping track and submitting paperwork or whatever on behalf of the fire companies?
That is the goal. Yes.
So it hasn't been done yet.
It has not, but the dollars didn't come down until just recently. In fact, yesterday was.
But you do have the funding now? so-
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. Ms. Ackley?
Does that apply to the public school system that had to purchase additional PPE equipment for cleaning and, okay?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Any further questions?
Just to follow up on the thing about the relief fund, is
Mr.
that
Taylor.
a change? Originally, I think the state put out that half of the money would go to the health department and half would go to the local jurisdictions themselves, the county. And that I think you're now indicating that the entire 18 million is going to be distributed through the health department, nothing through the county.
That's correct. Originally, the dollars were going to go to the county, but there is an indemnification clause that has to be signed if it goes directly to the county or to another entity, and that's why it went to the health department, because we do not have to sign an indemnification clause because it's state to state.
Does that answer your question?
That was unique for Wicomico, I think, though, wasn't it? In other words, other counties that are getting their half to the county.
The 5 large jurisdictions got their money
Yeah.
direct.
Yeah, upfront.
And then some of the other jurisdictions have decided to sign the agreement with the state. Some have not. Wicomico's not the only one that has not signed.
Yeah, I don't think we knew that until now.
All right, that was a good question. Any more questions or comments? All right, need a motion to adjourn from the County Board of Health and enter the legislative session.
So moved.
Got a motion, do you have a
Thank you.
second?
Thank you.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Now we're back in legislative session.